Welcome to our February the 10th Board of Trustees Committee of the Whole meeting. It's great to see everyone. We certainly appreciate your presence. Our first matter of business is approval of the consent calendar. We have a recommendation from the administration. Do I have a maker of the motion?
Motion to approve as presented.
Mrs. Doolin has made a motion. Do I have a second? A second by Mrs. Mosley. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to approve the consent calendar, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion carries. Our second matter of business is 2.01, appearance of visitors, and no visitors have signed up to speak today. Our third matter of business is administration, and Mr. Cochran will serve as the chair of the administration section today. And Mr. Cochran, I'm going to turn this section over to you at this time.
Thank you. The first item in the administration section this morning is 3.01, Shared Ownership Special Education Internal and External Review Final Report. Dr. Oyster, would you like to speak concerning this item?
Yes, Mr. Cochran, thank you. As you all will recall, over the last several years, the district has shown great improvement in outcomes for students with disabilities as demonstrated by test scores, graduation rates, successful participation in work-based learning opportunities, and other measures. However, we know that there are opportunities to improve and grow in the area of special education. Students with disabilities are first and foremost students, and we're committed to the success of all our students. You may recall that in November of '24, Committee of the Whole featured a comprehensive presentation by Assistant Superintendent for Special Education Services, Tracy Hogan, titled Serving Students with Disabilities in GCS, Our History, Our Progress, Our Challenges, Our Plans for the Future. One of the identified steps in that process was to conduct an external review of educational services to students with disabilities. I believe at that time it had been about 10 years since an external review had been conducted of special education services. Subsequent to that, the administration concluded that in addition to an external review, it would also be beneficial to undertake an internal review because the depth and breadth that we could reach with an internal review exceeded what would be done by an external review, and blended the positives of each. Obviously, with an external review, you have someone, an objective, third party, experienced in that area, assessing what you're doing and identifying opportunities, identifying in some cases strengths, some cases areas for growth, making some recommendations. The internal process, you have people most familiar with how things currently operate. And when I say people most familiar, that included parents, it included school level personnel, it included district level personnel, included some people from the community. People that are intimately familiar with how we currently work and how that might be improved from their perspective. And then our intent from that going forward will be to blend those two things to determine what we believe should be the appropriate path forward to continue the improvement of services to our students. Now, I said all that to caveat that with we have not had the opportunity yet to do that. We've had the internal report for a while. We received the final version of the external report on Friday. So in the next months, we will be blending those two together to help us inform an appropriate path forward that we will come back and present to the board when that is completed. Now, there will be some things we will act on ahead of that report that were very emphatically presented, particularly in the internal review. And I'll talk about those couple of things when we conclude these presentations today. But we want to make certain that we've taken full advantage of looking at both reports, putting the two together, and determining what is the most positive path forward that produces the most sustained improvement over time. Identifying first those things that can be most readily and easily implemented to gain the most improvement, then approaching other things in a more sequential manner. Particularly those things, I'm sure you'll see things in here that they have a dollar sign attached to them, which then requires additional planning to fold them into our revenue. However, most of the things that immediately emerged as extremely important to the participants in particularly the internal review are of a very low dollar impact, but a high, we believe, return on that investment. So again, this is a process that was started back in '24 and has taken us to this point. We are going to be, in some respects, very quick with implementation of certain things, and other things more deliberate and more measured in how we approach them. The way we've organized this today is Ms. Brinkman will present the shared ownership internal review, and she will gladly take any question that you might have when she finishes. Then we will hear from the external review team. We'll do the same there. If you have questions, if you ask them at that conclusion. However, you may have questions at that point that refer back to Ms. Brinkman's presentation. You certainly feel free to ask those questions. We tried to break it up a little bit so you don't perhaps lose focus on the question you had for Terry as you hear more information, but you still have the opportunity to circle back to that at the end. And at the end, Dr. Stevens will come up and will sort of moderate those questions so that we have the person most knowledgeable in that area to respond to your question. And at that point, I will, with one further statement, turn this over to Ms. Brinkman, and that being to express our appreciation to Ms. Brinkman for reappearing from retirement to conduct this process, which involved scores of people and hundreds of hours of time on the part of all these participants. So this was a very thorough gathering of information. So Terry, thank you, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Royster. I think you may have kind of alluded to the fact that you think I'm going to be really dull and bore them all into a catatonic state, and that's why we're breaking it up. So.
Well, I didn't want to say it that way. I
appreciate
felt you would give a motivating presentation. It would generate a lot of questions.
So for those of you who don't know me, I worked at the school district for 16 years. My specialty is not special ed. My specialty is communication and community relations. And so I like to at least think that my strengths are listening to people, gathering information, taking a look at it, and then sharing that information with others in a way that is hopefully understandable. So when Dr. Royster reached out to me in 2024, November I believe it was, the day before Thanksgiving, and said, would you be willing to help with special ed? I said, are you sure that you called the right number? And he said, yes, 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 we're looking for someone to really work with our stakeholders and ask them to share with us their experiences and really get that kind of anecdotal data from those who are living it every single day. And that sounded like it was in my wheelhouse, so my first question was, can Susan Clark help me? Susan, raise your hand. Susan's over here on the front row, and she has kept me out of trouble for many, many years. I retired in 21. Susan retired in 23, too? Okay. So we both have that broad overall knowledge of the district that, as Dr. Royster said, is important when you're doing an internal review, but we also have a little bit of distance. And Susan graciously agreed to help me, and she's just absolutely been incredibly important every step of the way. Before we get into all this, one thing I want to mention is that in any kind of review like this, you're looking for areas for improvement. When we did the initial survey, we got tons of positive feedback. And we really got positive feedback throughout this process, some of which you'll hear today. So as we kind of go down the rabbit hole of looking at areas for improvement, I just don't want it to be lost that we've got a lot of people doing really, really good work. And I want to say right now, thank you to you as a board, to the administration, to the folks in this district who work every day in the special ed department, to our special ed teachers, the specialists, our therapists, all of those folks. And then to our administrators and general ed teachers, who also, of course, work with students with disabilities. And I just don't want that to be lost as we do this. So I wanted to mention that on the front end. I'm going to move fairly quickly through these first few slides so that we can spend a little bit more time on the summit. So the first thing I want to do is just take a quick overview of the two reviews that took place concurrently. And the main thing I want you to look at is there on the second row. The external folks really focused on systems, procedures, policies, staffing, communication, and then the alignment between general and special education. Whereas we really focused on contact with families, staff, and partners to determine their real-life experiences. What's really going on? What kind of things are you dealing with? What are you seeing? And what have been some of your challenges? So the internal review really had 4 primary steps. And in June, the board got a report on the first 2 steps. Dr. Royster provided that report. We put it on the shared ownership website. The other thing I'd like to say thank you about is the fact that when Dr. Royster and I first discussed this, we talked about the need for transparency. And I have always been a big believer that transparency is how you build trust. I think Dr. Royster agrees with that. And so everything we have done has been posted on the school district's website, including every single open-ended survey answer we received, whether it was positive, negative, neutral, whatever. So I'm very appreciative of that and the fact that we were able to fulfill our promise to be very transparent. So again, there were 4 primary steps in the internal review, and you got a report on steps 1 and 2 back in June, but just as a quick review, step 1 was a survey of parents and guardians of children receiving special ed services. It was open January 16th through February 14th of 25. And we got about a 15% return rate, which market analysis says is pretty much in line with what you would expect if you don't have people where you can kind of hold them hostage until they complete a survey. So that's about 1,850 responses. We did do the survey in both Spanish and English. And then as soon as that was ended, we did an analysis of those results. And of course, in analysis, there were 16 questions that were on a Likert scale. Those are pretty easy. People rate from, bad to good, basically. Those are pretty easy to analyze. We did have 5 open-ended questions. And when you have 5 open-ended questions with about 1,800 responses, it takes a little time. And so Susan and I went through all of those responses, and we tried to categorize them and group them. And sometimes it was easy to do. Sometimes the answers were really clear, and sometimes you had to do a little bit of thinking what you thought they meant. But we got lots and lots of good information. And then we used that information to go to step 2, which was a series of forums. We had 8 in-person and 1 virtual forum. And these included forums with principals, assistant principals, and teachers, and then external forums with parents and community members. And then once all of those were done, Jeff McCoy, if you remember Jeff, he's only been gone for a few months, Jeff then had a second round of forums with the principals and with special ed department personnel to say, hey, here's what we heard in these forums. What do you think? And what are you hearing? And does this make sense to you? So I think there were a total of 11 forums in all. And really, these were just conversations. They were discussions. They were guided. But they were really, really good conversations. And since I thanked everyone else, I would also like to say thank you to everyone who participated in those forums. The parents who came to our forums, the forums were so productive. The parents were positive. I don't mean they only had good things to say. I mean that they contributed to the conversations. They participated. They were very thoughtful, and they gave really good feedback, and we're grateful for that. So the third step in the internal review was a shared ownership summit, and that's what we're mainly going to talk about today. It occurred in September, and it was a 2-day deep dive on 3 topics, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. And then step 4 is today. This is our report to the administration with comprehensive findings and recommendations. And I use that term very loosely, the recommendations part, because as I mentioned, I don't have a background in special education. Neither does Susan. And so what we're really doing is we're bringing kind of a comprehensive look at the recommendations that were made. But we didn't take those recommendations and then vet them and say, okay, this is what's possible and not possible. This is really just a comprehensive look, because I promised our stakeholders all along that anything you say to us, we are going to then share with the administration and with the Board of Trustees, and that's what we're doing. So step 3, as I mentioned, is the summit. So let's talk about it a little bit. Well, it makes perfect sense that your first question may be, okay, who came to the summit? Well, we had about 80 stakeholders. And again, we did a 2-day deep dive into special education. And the obvious question of who participated and how were they chosen is answered on the screen. And I realize that print is really small. But essentially, we looked at parents who completed the survey. I said we had about 1,800 parents who completed the survey. And in the first round, we said, hey, we're going to have this summit. In theory, are you willing to participate? And about 900 people said they were, so about 50%. So after we went through the forms and we finally set a summit date, we sent the date out and we said, you said initially you're ready, that you're willing. So here's the actual dates. Who can actually commit to 2 days? And we got about 120 people who said, yes, I still want to participate and I am able to participate. So then we had to choose, because if you've got 120 parents and then you bring in, representatives that you need from all of the other stakeholders, you've got an unwieldy group, really. So we knew we wanted to keep it around 80 to 90 folks. So we started going through and saying, how are we going to pick these folks? So the first thing we said was, if they filled out a survey, if they said they're willing to participate, if they said that they're committed to participating, and if they came to a forum, they are automatically invited, because we know that they have something to say. We then said, okay, so we have this number of people who fit all those, check all those boxes, but now we want to make absolutely sure that we have broad representation. We want to have representation from different school levels. We want to have representation from different geographic areas. We want to have representation of those who are in self-contained and resource classes. We want to have representation from those who are at elementary, middle, and high. So we started going through and looking at all of these different factors. And we made sure that we invited parents from all the different disability categories, from all over the district, all the different school levels. And so what we ended up with when all was said and done was RSVPs and confirmation of attendance. And we covered every disability category but one. And the only disability category that we did not have represented at the summit was traumatic brain injury. But we had all of the other disability categories represented, and that was very important to us. We also invited general and special education teachers. Those were selected based on a number of things. The recommendation of special ed personnel who work with them every day, principal recommendation, experiences with those folks. We invited principals, again, to make sure we've got representation from different school levels, different geographic areas, different socioeconomic populations. Then we had SPED and district leadership. Those were selected by the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, and me, sitting around a table talking about who really needed to be in the room, both to know what was going on and because they would have good input, and because they had a broad understanding of legal ramifications of how things are done now, of what the protocols are, all of those things. And then we invited District 1 PTA and SIC representatives, as well as partner agencies such as Family Connections, Special Olympics, Best Buddies, and Transition Alliance of South Carolina. So the next obvious question is, okay, so what were your topics and how did you choose your topics? So we went through the survey and the form, and a couple of topics just kept rising to the top. And in the forms, what we really talked about was communication, both internal and external. We talked about transitions between grade levels and schools. And we talked about, what was the third thing? I only did 9 of those, so you know. I'm blanking out on the third one. I'm sorry? Staff and parent. No, this was in the forums. I'm sorry, the forums. I'll get back to you on that. So anyway, so we took those 3 topics, we talked about those at all the forums, and then some more things kind of came up from that, and we went back and looked at, at the survey responses, and so we ended up with a list of things that we could possibly talk about at the summit. And basically, we looked at those and we said, okay, well, this thing is going to be totally controlled by budget, and what we don't want to do is have a summit where we get all of this input, and then all of a sudden we say, well, you had lots of great ideas, we can't do any of them because the budgetary implications are so strong, and we have to rely on numerous agencies like the legislature to make sure that we'd have the money to implement this. We didn't want to do anything that the external review was really focusing on because we knew that that was their area and something that they would have recommendations on. So what we came up with at the end of the day was that we were going to talk about building relationships, inclusive environments, and staff and parent training. And so using a list of these guiding questions, the summit participants divided into 3 groups. Each group had about 28 or 30 people in it. And they sat at individual 4-person tables, and they discussed these questions and came up with recommendations. And then they kind of vetted them among themselves. And then they shared those with their larger topic group of about 30. And then we did a gallery walk for everyone. And everyone who participated in the summit was able to go through, see all of the ideas, and vote using stars. And it was really funny because people were super, super careful with their stars. They were hilarious. They're like, we need to walk through one more time. We don't want to give a star to something and then find something that we like better. So they were really, really into the whole thing. They were really focused. And it was a lot. It was 2 days of focus, and they did a fantastic job, and I appreciate that. So topic 1, as I mentioned, was inclusive practices. The facilitator for this subgroup was Branna Myers. Some of you may know her. Branna worked at almost every level of school in Greenville County. She retired a few years ago as the director of a Entry Career Center. There we go. And so the charge to her particular group about inclusive practices was to identify actions, strategies, and expectations that will further develop a welcoming and supportive inclusive mindset and culture in our schools. We are not just looking for a to-do list. Instead, we are looking for strategies and experiences that will teach and model acceptance and compassion so that inclusive practices become the natural default setting of all administrators, teachers, and classmates. To be clear, this is not referring to the concept of academic inclusion as required by IDEA and set up by IEP teams. I wanted to make that clear on the front end. So what did this group come up with? Well, this is one of the places that we found some real positives. When teachers and principals and administrators and parents sat down and started talking, what they found is that we have a lot of really great things for inclusive practices in Greenville County schools. And what they said was, you know what, here's our main idea. Number 1 up there, let's come up with a measure of inclusivity and let's put it on the report cards. So we explained to them that we don't get to control the state report cards and what's on there and what's measured. So they said, well, why don't we start doing a measure of inclusivity in Greenville County where we measure our schools, we give them a ranking or a grade or something along those lines about how well they do in including their students with disabilities in the culture of the school. And then perhaps eventually we can get that to scale up statewide and be a part of the state report cards. So I thought that was a really outside the box idea. They also talked about the fact that it would be great if we took some of these amazing options that we have in our schools and did a menu of inclusion options for our other schools so that everyone could look around and see fairly easily what other schools are doing to make sure that students are included in the pulse of the school. We talked about learning, walk, look fars, and that was a moment of celebration because Susan Stevens was able to stand up and say, good news, we are already doing this. We have on the next ILT meeting on our agenda, we already have it set, and we have already come up with some of these look fars. So that means that as administrators walk around and observe classrooms, there's certain things that they'll check to make sure that students with disabilities have full access to the curriculum and are being included in all of the activities. They asked that we do an annual survey measuring family perception of inclusion, that we do intentional pairings of students with and without disabilities, look for opportunities where you can pair them together so they can get to know each other. They said we need to make sure that there's a seat at the table, that in things like the SIC and planning committees for things like homecoming and Spirit Week and student government, we have representation of students with disabilities. They said, let's look at some celebrations focused on students with disabilities. They talked about Special Olympics and what an easy thing it would be to celebrate the students who sometimes aren't the center of attention at the school, and to give them an opportunity to be celebrated by their classmates. And then they asked for optional parent-teacher conferences at all levels. Of course, parent-teacher conferences occur at elementary school, but parents of students with disabilities said it would really be helpful for us to be able to continue those in the middle and high school. So that was the main takeaways from the inclusive practices. The full report that is on your board material, of course, has more, but these are the ones that kind of rose to the top and got the most attention. Our second area in the summit was positive, productive relationships, and that facilitator was Dee Dee Washington. Dee Dee's also retired, and she was I think when she left the school district, she was the associate superintendent for academics. She used to be the principal at Brushy Creek Elementary, and when she was there, I think relationship building was one of her real strengths, so she was eager to work on this topic. Her charge was to identify strategies that foster positive, productive relationships among all members of the school community. This includes relationships between and among students with and without disabilities, school personnel, and families of students with and without disabilities. It's probably no surprise to anyone that many of the findings and recommendations in groups 1 and 2 overlapped, as did some of the previous things that came out of the forum in the survey. After all, inclusive practices and strong communication help build trust, which build a foundation for good relationships, and vice versa. Specifically, this group's findings or recommendations included communication. So much that we did went back to communication. They want it to be productive, detailed, consistent, and one thing we heard over and over again was a single platform for parents, so that parents, when they're dealing with this teacher, aren't working off of this platform, this teacher off another platform, so they don't have to go to multiple places to find the information they need. They asked for a coordinator of partnerships and special education support. I will say that when they got through mentioning all the things that they would like for this person to do, it would be next to impossible for one person to do it. But they looked for someone who could maybe coordinate all of the training for parents and training for staff on special education, someone who could serve as an ombudsman, someone who could help them navigate the system when maybe things aren't working the way they think they would, when they can't seem to get a response, or when they aren't sure what their next step should be, a person that they could call. They talked about annual special education forums. They said it did not need to be quite as elaborate as the summit, which we appreciated, but they said the forums gave them an opportunity to not only give feedback to the school district, but to meet and talk with other parents who were trying to navigate the system with a student with disabilities as well, and they talked about how incredibly valuable that was to them. They too asked for a seat at the table, and one of the things they mentioned was a parent council for families of students with disabilities, whether it be called a SEAC or a special ed PTA. They don't really care what it's called, but some opportunity for parents of families with, parents of students with disabilities to meet together and to give feedback and have an influence on school district decisions. They asked for meet the teacher options. They said that as parents of students with disabilities, so often they feel like they need to have a conversation with their child's teacher, and that it would be very beneficial if they were able to have that conversation at the beginning of the school year. But Meet the Teacher Night is not the place for that, because it tends to be more like a celebration of the return to school, and it's loud and it's boisterous and it's all those things. They also mentioned the fact that for some of our students, particularly those with disabilities or anxiety, that's a really difficult kind of environment to navigate. So they just asked that there be options. They talked about a parent resource. They said when you find yourself in the world of special education and maybe you don't have any background in that, you don't even know the questions to ask. You don't really know what the processes are. So they ask really for a parent resource that told them, here's what you need to know, here's what you should expect. Here's kind of a timeline. This is, you can figure out where you are on this timeline, and here's the decisions that'll be coming up that you need to make. They talked about Family Connections, and they were very happy that when we told them that we were taking the Family Connections website and putting it in a more prominent location on our website, and that happened during the summit based on feedback at the summit. They were appreciative of that. Then they said the Family Connections is very helpful, but it gives broad information about things, which is wonderful. But we need then the Greenville County Schools, and particularly the Communication Department, to maybe come back and give us information on how things work specifically in Greenville County. And they ask that all of this be organized by topic and easy to search. And then they talked about the Key to Ed framework for IEPs. I just remember the third topic of the forums was listening in IEPs. And so a lot of the things that we heard from that, when we started talking about it more at the summit, we kept hearing about Key to Ed and about Key to Ed and Key to Ed and how the Key to Ed framework really would address all of these things, including start with the end in mind, including have a conversation about your ultimate goals and your child as a person before you really start talking about what needs to happen. And so we'll talk about that just a little bit more in just a second. Our third topic at the summit was staff and parent training. Jeff McCoy was the facilitator for that. We thought Jeff would be a good person to choose because not only is he good in this sort of setting, but he knew the most about what was already being offered since he had just left the district. And the charge for that group was to identify the topics related to special education most in need of additional training for both school staff and parents, and the continuum of training needed as students age, strategize how to ensure parents and staff are aware of these trainings, as well as creative ways to deliver the training and incentivize attendance and implementation. That last sentence is a particularly challenging one. So this group, their results are divided up. For staff, one of the things that we heard more and more is that we need more interaction and shared development between general and special education teachers. And one of the ideas that rose to the top was take master teachers, identify them, and then let them teach classes and have other teachers who are struggling about how to serve their students with disabilities come in and observe. They talked again about Key to Ed training and how that would be so helpful. It would help staff members both know and understand their role a little bit more in the IEP and how they can help the process. It would help with the building of relationships, all of those things. They talked about strategies for and a resource library on disability categories. One of the things we heard from teachers is there are so many disabilities and there are so many ways those can be manifested in a classroom. And so it is overwhelming to us to go and hear all of that in one setting. What would really be great is if we got our class roster, if we knew that we had students with these particular disabilities, if we could go look somewhere in their past record and see a little bit about how that's been manifesting, and then we could go to this resource library and say, I want to watch a video or see a slide deck specifically on this disability. They also ask, of course, for strategies for behavior management and classroom control. It's probably no surprise that behavior came up in all of our discussions and all of our topics. They talked about needing to have a better understanding of IEP roles and responsibilities. They said that sometimes, apparently in college, they do not get a lot of information about special ed and about IEPs. And they said sometimes we're terrified to even say anything because we're really not sure if it's going to be helpful, if it's going to be a problem. It all feels very serious, and it feels like we might say the wrong thing or take a misstep. So it would help us to better understand what our roles and responsibilities are. They wanted more information on progress monitoring. Ms. Hogan and I have talked about the fact that there's some confusion. Sometimes people use progress monitoring when they mean progress reports, and that's different. I think they specifically meant progress monitoring in a way to better write that progress monitoring in a way that gives parents some of the information they're looking for so that they have a better understanding of how the students are progressing towards the IEP goals, and also what they can do at home to help support them and help maybe accelerate that. And then they talked about equivalent IEP modifications and accommodations. Again, they said our special ed department is great for this. When we have someone come in from another district and maybe they use different language or they have different options, but we don't always know what our equivalent is of those. And they said, while we can certainly reach out to our special ed department and they will provide that for us, and they're great to do that, it's bad for us when we're sitting in an IEP and we don't know those things, and it makes it seem like maybe we're not as understanding of this as we should be. So we'd love more information on that. For the parents, they said, again, we would like a menu of videos and slide decks by topic because parents admitted sometimes we don't go to training, even if it's special education training, because it's not something we're dealing with right then. Or we'll go and we won't pay as much attention as maybe we would if we knew that, 3 weeks later we were going to be dealing with the same thing. So they ask again that there be a resource where they can go and access those as they need them. They ask again for processes and timelines for what to expect. Behavior management. They said, we want to be able to use some of the same strategies at home so that the child is getting consistency at home and at school. That goes back to that strong partnership that we know is the best way to do things. They ask for enrichment opportunities and GCS pathways to be laid out in a way that they know about them. They said so often we'll hear about something, but we won't realize that was an option for our child, and we'll hear about it, third hand. They asked for an annual survey, again, of families to determine training needs. And they said if you want to increase participation, and they recognize the fact that it's hard, provide both in-person and virtual training, save those trainings, record them, save them in a video library, provide dinner and childcare. And if you will host training for all levels by geographic areas, we think that also would help build a little bit of a support network. So those were their suggestions. As always, when you have a lot of compassionate and passionate folks talking about a topic, some of our strategies didn't fit neatly into these categories. I'm not going to go through these, but they are in the presentation and they are also in the final report. If, when I take questions, you have questions about any of these or need me to explain kind of where this came from or what they're talking about, I'll be happy to do that. But I think I've actually surpassed my time already. So, that is my presentation. Again, we focused on steps 3 and 4, or 3 really, this is step 4, because 1 and 2 you had already received. So I'm happy, as Dr. Verweister said, thrilled to take any questions at this time.
Mr. Sailors?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Cochran. Terry, thanks. We all believe that when this process started and you were leading it, we would get the thorough report that we did, so thank you very
Thank you so
much.
much.
Susan did a great job making her look good. Thank you.
As always.
First of all, I just want to set the record straight on one thing. There's a lot of folks in this room that I've dealt with as a parent over the years, as a special ed parent myself. I see a lot of faces in this room. And so from the top of your organization, Ms. Hogan, all the way down to your newest employee, and everyone in between, I want to thank you for the work that you do and the love that you put into this work. Being a teacher is a hard enough gig to begin with. Dealing with students and families in the special ed arena is even more of a job. And you do it very well. You do it professionally, and you do an outstanding job every year. And I join Dr. Royster in thanking you for what you do, every one of you. Terry, in your topic 2, there was a comment in there about the parent councils, and that the respondents and the participants wanted to see potentially a parent council. Now, most everybody in this room knows my interaction with school systems around the country, so I'm going to look at it through that lens for the moment. I've seen parent councils in special ed in a lot of places. The idea's good, the need is genuine, the outcomes are problematic because you have, let's say, 15 different areas of issue when it comes to a student with special needs. And not every parent in that room agrees because, unfortunately, they're zoned into their world like I was. And I don't have daily understanding of what the others have to contend with. So there's not a lot of, I've seen and heard of not a lot of give and take. So my question is, if we were to do something like that here, how can we break that barrier down?
Okay. So one of the things we did talk about was the fact that when you have a committee, to your point, you have limited perspectives.
Yes.
So if you see just above that, there's the idea of these annual special education forums. I think those two things were kind of two sides of the same coin. And so one of the things we said is if we did these forums, there would be more opportunity for more voices in the room because you can't have too many voices in a room on a committee.
Right.
When you have a forum, you have more opportunities for more people to come together, and particularly if you have a series of them. So in my opinion, having the forums might be a better alternative, but there may be those in the special education world who have specific reasons for wanting a specific committee made up of
5 or 6 or 10 or even maybe 20 parents rather than having that broad input. And it may be simply the fact that they feel like you can build a stronger relationship with the administration. You can maybe work more easily to come up with recommendations. I don't know what those might be. But that was the feedback that we got, and when we discussed it, we talked about the two sides of that coin in the forums and the advisory committee. I will say that the main thing that we heard over and over again was we want more and more opportunities to share our perspectives and to influence the decisions ahead of time. However,
And the takeaway from your comment there could be, if we went in that direction, it could be a Part A and a Part B, forum, then a committee, depending on
yeah, I mean, you
how
can,
the forums work.
you could do a little bit like we did this and take kind of the things that rise to the top in the forums, and then you could bring those to the committee. Because one of the things you have to decide anytime you have a committee is what's going to be on the agenda and how do you decide what's on the agenda, right? So that would be a process, if you wanted it to be a process for figuring out what was on the agenda. Or you could simply say these forums are our opportunities for our parents to have this kind of input that you're looking for.
Under topic 3, you mentioned briefly what I'm going to call continuing ed or professional development. I know that when the shared ownership model was originally established and Dr. Hogan, Ms. Hogan and Dr. Royster pressed that usage and lifted that up, if you will, one of the areas of interest was inclusion of general ed of teachers in the general ed community, thus taking students and working to send them back to their base schools like we implemented. And there was professional development put into the budget at that time. So I'm going to ask this question, and Dr. Royster may have to answer it. If we expand the PD for this area and we want to do things following the recommendation of these forums and this process, then how are we going to identify the time and the money? Because that's always been the critical factor, is having to ask staff to come in earlier in the school year than they normally would, like we've had with reading initiatives and so forth. So how are we going to address that, Dr. Royster?
As we move forward from the acceptance of the information in these two reports, one of the things that stands out, and you've seen it referenced in here multiple times, is appropriate staff development. So appropriate staff development, if you get a little bit further down into that, means there are some mandatory trainings we need to do with all teachers of special education.
What about gen ed? Include them as well?
Well, that was about to be my next point.
Okay, sorry.
There are, in essence, 6,000 teachers in this school district that provide instruction to special education students. That's how many teachers there
Yes,
are in
sir.
the district. So some of that needs to be mandatory. Some of it needs to be targeted towards certain subjects or to address what we may have identified as certain deficiencies in the training for certain groups of teachers, whether that be by a particular category or merely the fact that this group of teachers seems to lack understanding in this area. Now, that's just on the teacher side. There also needs to be some adjustment to the professional development for administrators. For example, this past year, we put all the school level administrators through a training to better facilitate their leadership as the lead person on an IEP team at the school level. So all of these recommendations, we got to take and go through them and determine what needs to be done, what sequence it should be done in, how much of it would fit within our current time and resources, and how much money will we need to expand upon that. So as you could, I think, pick up pretty quickly from that description, that's something we can't sit here today and say, we need to do, and I know you weren't expecting that, we need to do 28 days for 2,000 people, and it'll cost X million
And that's part of a part of your intro was short-term, long-term. I would imagine this is not going to be a short-term solution. Answer to that one question.
There'll be a portion of it, I think, Mr. Sailors, that would be short-term, like we did the thing with the leads from each school for the IEPs.
Right.
There'll be some of that that might be short-term, we can get pretty quickly. The most impactful areas. Others, it's going to be long-term. Basically, it's time and it's resources. Both resources from the standpoint of having people available to do the training. And because of the number of people involved, anytime we've done large-scale training, we have found it to be most efficient when we train our own trainers so that we can do it with our own personnel. Sometimes that requires them being trained by somebody else. But then we have that resource not just for the present, but for the teachers and others that we will employ going forward. Because as you know, we have 9.9% turnover in teachers each year. We also have turnover in paraprofessionals. So we talked about the 6,000 teachers. There are hundreds of paraprofessionals, and there are scores of other people throughout the organization. There's hundreds of people in transportation that receive currently specialized training regarding students with disabilities, but there may be aspects of that training that need to be reviewed. So most times when people hear training, they'll automatically think of training the special ed teachers, but not necessarily the realization as you have brought to light. Every teacher is a teacher of students with disabilities, and we have all these other people that are providing services in addition to teachers. So this is a short-term and an extremely long-term fix that we need to do as much that will have the greatest impact as quickly as we can, but again, providing the quality we need to provide, and recognize that everybody's not in the same place, and we got to tailor some of that to people who need more and to people who need less.
Thank you. Well, I think it goes without saying that when we see the results of blending gen ed and special ed into one instructional model, as we did as part of shared ownership, you see the special ed population success rate increase, which increases our grad rate. And so at the end of the day, I think you said it, or someone said it earlier, we're living it every day. And again, I appreciate all of your work. Thank you.
Ms. Leventis Wells.
Thank you, Chairman Cochran. First of all, kudos to both you and Susan. Anything that y'all are involved in is top-notch. I have the utmost respect for both of you, and I appreciate all the time y'all put in. I do have just one question, Terry. I did attend some of these, and they were they were very well executed and involved and participated. And I think, did Deb Sophia, was she involved in?
Yes.
She was involved, because she was at a couple of them that I attended. Can you tell me, I know that this was only for parents who had children currently in the district, because there were many parents that felt like they wish they could have been involved because they had pulled their children out and they would have loved to have been involved in conveying some of, some things that we could build on.
So that's not 100% accurate. When we did the forums, okay, you see the very last one under step 2 says external parents, guardians, and community members.
Okay.
So we had both a virtual forum and an in-person forum that anyone could attend.
Okay, and that was step 2?
Yeah, that was back during the forums. Yeah.
Okay.
So we did,
Because
which
there
is what
were
you
a
attended.
number that called, and I said, I'm not really You know, I don't know how to ask this question, but I will ask it to Terry because she will be honest and upfront.
And we actually, at the in-person forum for the community members, we did have almost all parents, but some of them were former parents who had been in our system and for various reasons left, or parents who have a child who will be in our system.
Okay. Well, good for clarifying that for me. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the information you've given us today and the updates. And I hope this will continue and it won't stop. And I hope the two of y'all will be involved in the future. Thank you so much.
Ms. Mosley.
Thank you so much. Hi, Terry. So I don't think it's any big secret when I got elected to this board, I still had 3 children in this district, and 2 of them received special education services, and I have been anxiously awaiting all this information. I need one point of clarity, Dr. Royster. I think I understood you to say that what we're hearing today, both with Terry's presentation and the next presentation, is a bunch of information, but that we will have a follow-up report from the administration with the actual steps that are going to be taken, the action plans or recommendation. I mean, I don't know quite what to call them, but
Yes.
okay.
It might in fact be more than one, but
Right.
yes,
Okay. So today it is just information sharing,
exactly.
and what we see when we say findings or the word recommendation is not necessarily going to be exactly what happens, or it might be combined in what happens, or dependent
Might
on
be-
budgetary constraint. I mean, all of that, right?
Might be combined, or we might identify some strategy to address the stated need that might not have been the suggested
Okay.
strategy, but it still addresses the
Okay.
stated need.
Thank you for that clarification, because
Yes,
I
ma'am.
don't think I came into it understanding that until you said what you said at the beginning, so I appreciate that. That will maybe solve a lot of the phone calls I might receive after today. That being said, as a parent of 2 children who receive special ed services in this district, I navigated it for many years. And it's interesting to me, I attended some of the forums and I heard a lot of the themes that, even though I've been removed from that role for several years, some of the same themes that I struggled with as a parent were still rising to the top in this. So I am glad to see that a lot of that was fleshed out and that it came out and that we're having conversations about it. In particular, I cannot stress enough, and there's a lot of great findings and commentary on this, but one thing that I think is very significant that I know personally, because I lived it in a very real way, the meet the teacher options. I think that's enormously important for us to prioritize. I don't know what that looks like. I know that when I had an elementary student, one of the most meaningful things that my administrator did, my principal, who is now retired, is that at the end of the year IEP meeting for my child, she brought together the whole team that included the teacher that had my child for the year and the teacher that was going to get my child the next year. And I know for a fact that we have administrators in this district that like to keep that information close to the vest. We don't like to share who their child's teacher is going to be until meet the teacher night for everybody. But that was an enormously easy, low-hanging fruit thing that my administrator did every single year that I can state for the record, there's other administrators in the district at that time that refused to do stuff like that. So I would really like to see a priority placed on that. The other thing I would, and maybe this is going to be coming out, is the lack of consistency the district has had across the board. And I think you pointed this out to some degree where we felt like, or I should say the parents felt like, what might be happening at one school might not be happening in another. And I realize that that's not possible in all aspects. But I do think that, well, what I'm hoping to see, because that's one thing, I sat at a lot of IEP tables that were not my children's IEP tables across the district. And if there's one thing I can say, you have a lot of well-meaning people at a lot of different schools, but they seem to be functioning in that like a silo, and that, you know, each school was a little bit different. And I, on more than one occasion, heard an administrator or a district representative in special ed say, we can't do that here. And I thought, well, that's interesting because you're doing it 5 miles down the road at XYZ school. And because I'd witnessed it or I'd lived it. So that's hopefully, that's something I wanted to say out loud to the team because I know that seems to be coming out of, I mean, the information coming out here seems to be consistent with what I used to live and experience. My last commentary on this, and I echo a lot of what Mr. Saylor said about my appreciation for how hard all of you work. I've worked with many of you. I've sat at tables with many of you. I am enormously grateful for the special education team in this district. However, I don't think I can stress this enough, and as a board member, I'm going to state for the record that I think we need to very seriously consider a parent council or whatever word we want to give it. And the reason I say this is because we have a teacher forum that represents the 6,000 teachers in this district. So I do see value in the forum comment of where we bring more people together, because it's great when you get to share information with other parents and, oh, how are you handling this? What did you do to solve this? Because there's always somebody that's a little further ahead of you on the journey. But I also think it's valuable for, just like we use Teacher Forum, to bounce ideas off of them, they come together representing their schools and to say to the district, hey, here's what we're hearing, at our level, at the school level. Because the district can't be at every place all the time. And we are a huge district. So I understand there's a lot to be fleshed out. I understand Mr. Saylor's point about how too many cooks in the kitchen, sometimes you don't get any good result. But I do think that there has to be a way for us to create that feedback mechanism, not so much to tell the district how to do their job, but to have the conversations and ask the right questions and say, hey, just to be another sounding board. So that's my personal opinion and actually my board opinion. I may have more questions after we hear the next presentation.
I'll be here.
But
I've been told I'll be here.
but I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for everybody that participated in this, parents, administrators, teachers, everybody. I really appreciate it. Jeff, I'm turning back to you.
Dr. Stiles.
Thank you, Ms. Brinkman and Ms. Clark. I want to say, first of all, wow, I am blown away. As a former administrator, this is really good stuff. And thank you to everyone who participated. I can say that I feel like we are definitely on the right path forward. In particular, in this work, I love the inclusive practices. And I love the idea of sharing those inclusive practices so that everybody has a menu of options and everybody has ideas. Sometimes we fail to share and look at those who have expertise in that area or who do a great job. But by bringing those involved together and sharing those practices, I think that really supports our special education students in general. So thank you so much for that. I also like the idea of special education students having the opportunity to meet their teacher prior to the Meet the Teacher event. They should enjoy that Meet the Teacher event just like every other student. I think that's really important. And I want to share one more thought, and I have a question about it, is at the end of the year, we, develop IEPs for the next school year. And I know that transitions can be difficult for special education students. I too believe if there's any way possible to allow that student to meet their teacher for the next school year, I think that would be ideal. I know that we have transitions, teachers change, retire, and move. But in some situations, I believe that we should be able to do that. I think that's an excellent idea. In regard to the IEP, when I was a principal in the Blue Ridge community, in our community, we always made a point, like for example, in 5th grade, when a student was special education student was transitioning to 6th grade, we would always make sure that we had one of the teachers from the Blue Ridge Middle School come to that IEP meeting. And that was very supportive of the parent and the student, and it helped the parent to feel good about the transition. We did that in the Blue Ridge schools. I'm just wondering, and Dr. Royster, maybe perhaps you or one of your administrators can answer this question. Is that a practice that permeates throughout the district? Do we try to make an effort when there's an IEP meeting at a time of transition, like 5th grade or 8th grade, where they're going to a new setting? Do we try to make sure that we bring a teacher in from the receiving school to be a part of that IEP?
I believe that's a common practice. Dr. Stevens, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, that is a common practice that we, as much as possible, extend that invitation. We, of course, encourage our administrators to creatively schedule those meetings so that those teachers, those receiving teachers, can participate in those conversations. And then also we've expanded our transition support meetings for our administrative teams and our teachers from elementary to middle school, and then from middle school to high school. The planning meetings that are happening behind the scenes to support the teachers, to support the administrators, to make sure that we have the correct supports in place for students as they are making those transitions.
That is excellent. I'm so glad to hear that, because that's such a wonderful practice. Thank you so much for your time.
Ms. Dooley.
Thank you so much for this whole process.
You're welcome.
My question is that about 1.5 years ago, we heard from some parents at the microphone where you are now, asking for a forum, and I think asking for a lot of the things that came out through this process. So, and I think we all agree that we're ready for a parent forum or a council or whatever it's going to be called. Under topic 2, it says annual special education forums, and I hope that that's not the same thing as what is going to be a parent council, because I don't think if a forum meets annually, I don't feel like that's enough. I would say quarterly at a minimum. But how soon can that be implemented?
That's a question for Dr. Royster.
I think the first thing that we need to determine is what is the most appropriate thing that will serve the needs of those students, and will serve the needs of the schools and of the district. And one of the things we have to think about is, and I mentioned it earlier when I talked about the number of teachers involved in this, we have the delivery of special education services occurring at nearly 100 locations, 99. There are 99 locations in this district that serve students. So they're delivering special ed services to about 15,000 students across, I think generally people consider there to be 13 groups related to types of disabilities. So if you want to be impactful with the feedback that you get, then we need to carefully consider where is the point at which that feedback should be provided, that it has the most impact on the services being delivered at those 99 different locations. Some might argue that you should have a form of feedback at every school. Then there is what might the feedback look like at a district level. And how do you account for the fact that if you have a forum, you can include larger numbers of people. If you have some sort of council, that immediately really denotes a very small group of people. So a very small group of people giving advice about the services being provided to 15,000 students, what's the best way for that to be structured that ensures that every voice is heard, but realizing that some of those categories have far more students within that category than others do. And you will see, if you look at the structuring of those forums, it was purposeful in proportioning out to try to ensure that we got somewhat of an equalized voice. Teacher forum was mentioned. We meet with them frequently. They meet throughout the year, and that's 90 some odd voices, because they represent every school in the district. So what we've got to do is look through this and see what do we believe is the most effective means to ensure that voices are heard, and they're heard in a manner that directly and positively influence the actions that occur throughout the entire school district.
Great. How long will
In
that-
short, I'm not going to be able to answer that today as to, I'm not going to say it's going to be April the 15th or June the 30th.
Do you think it could be by next school year that something could be in place?
I think it depends on what we determine as we look through all these recommendations. Because again, we got this second report that you hadn't heard yet. We got it a couple hours before you got it. So we want to look at that, and we want to bring people into the room that are directly affected by this and get feedback from them.
Are there any other questions before we move on? Dr. Presley?
Thank you so much. And Ms. Brinkman, the special ed team for the district, the parents and the advocates, everyone who's been involved in this, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to where we are in this process, because we all collectively have gotten ourselves here. Two things that I just want to place on the radar before we hear from the next group. I'm seeing this kind of sift into two pots based on this initial conversation or this initial presentation. One is advocacy, parent advocacy, and the other is professional support. And what I want us to be mindful of, if at all possible, is a way to channel and to capture all of those viewpoints. Yes, we do have 100 sites. Yes, we do have 15,000 children being served. There are ways to do that. There are ways to capture the granular perspectives of many, and to also utilize some of our very well-informed advocates that we have out there to carry that forward. I also advocate for a parent advocacy council, whatever we end up calling that. I think that there is power in those perspectives, and I feel like there's a way to do that right now. From a professional development standpoint, we need to be very mindful of being very prescriptive. And I wrote this question down: how can we make sure that we have an understanding, as Dr. Royster has said, of what the true needs are of our gen ed educators, our special ed educators, and how those meet in the middle to support that. We also know that good professional development is over time. It is job embedded, and again, it is very prescriptive. So I look very forward to hearing the next steps from our district in both of these areas. And again, Dr. Royster, I want to thank you and your team for what you've done thus far. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Presley.
If there are no further questions at this point, we will move on to the second presentation. Mrs. Brinkman, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Tamara Davis. I'm coming to you from the American Institutes for Research as part of the external evaluation team to present our findings and recommendations. And I just want to say I'm happy to be here. It has been a long process. It's been great working with Tracy and Tisha and her team. So we are just really excited to be here at this point and presenting the findings and recommendations. So for the presentation today, first I'll just share our team because it was a team of us. I'm the only one here from the team today. We'll give you an overview of the project, including a little background, go straight into the findings and the recommendations, and then open it up for questions. So this is our team. So beginning with myself, I'm a researcher with AIR, and I served as one of the project directors for this particular evaluation. Jenna is also a researcher. She was our qualitative data lead. We did quite a bit of qualitative research for this evaluation. Kenzie Candre was our communication specialist, so she supported data collection and analysis. Hannah Keepers was our research assistant. Again, she supported our data collection and analysis and report writing. And then lastly, Lindsay Hayes, who is a principal researcher with AIR. She served as our quality assurance reviewer, which with majority of our team having backgrounds in special education, including professional and educational experience. So in terms of an overview of this study, our company, we responded to Greenville County Schools' request for proposals back in December of 2024. So we were commissioned to conduct this external review of the special education services as part of the district's shared ownership strategic review process. With this review, GCS identified and prioritized 4 key areas to guide the review, and which I'll show on the next slide. So these are the 4 key focus areas in which will be organized in terms of how we present the findings and the recommendations and their alignment with these 4 key focus areas. So the first one being systems, procedures, and policies for quality implementation. Area 2 is staffing. Area 3, alignment between general education and special education. And then area 4 was communication. So with the development of our research questions for this study or this evaluation, they're going to be aligned with these 4 key focus areas. So in terms of our data collection activities, we have 5 in total. So the first one was extant data. So we looked at those family survey results that were included in that internal review, staff allocation and caseload data, staff certification data. And then in terms of a document review, there were a robust number of documents that were included in this review. So there is a plethora that I'm sharing here. So again, those internal review summaries and reports, communication materials, the websites, training plans, and other instructional documents, policy and procedural documents, which we'll mention throughout the presentation today. We also conducted an IEP review. So we reviewed 101 randomly selected IEPs, and they were representative across schools, grade levels, and disability categories. And we rated those using a vetted document called the IQUIS, or the IQUIS, so IEP Quality Indicator Scale. And that particular document is actually aligned with the required components for IEPs as aligned in IDEA. In addition to that, we also conducted district leader interviews. So in total, there were 11 interviews. Either they were individual or small group interviews with district level staff, including the superintendent, assistant superintendent, directors, and coordinators. And then we also conducted 9 virtual focus groups, and they were role specific. So principals, general and special education teachers, paraprofessionals, the special education specialists, behavior specialists, psychologists, and related service providers. So what we will say is, as a team, we were very pleased with the amount of enthusiasm to participate in those interviews and focus groups. What we find in these reviews is sometimes it's really hard to get participation. So we were really pleased with the amount of participation in these activities. So going straight into findings. So all of the all of the findings will be organized in this way. So in the blue box, you'll see that particular finding statement and then supporting statements. So the first one is, although GCS has comprehensive guidance documents and resources for ensuring compliance with federal and state special education requirements, policies are not consistently understood or applied by all staff, particularly at the school level. And this was an outcome, as you saw, we did a plethora of interviews and focus groups, especially at the school level. And so, they have awareness of these documents, but in terms of how they're used in everyday practice, there was variance there. And then in terms of how these things are communicated, this was something that staff highlighted, is that they do receive, again, those weekly updates were something that we reviewed, but in terms of things that might be included from those special education procedure manuals, it might be embedded in those weekly updates where it's an inclusion of important and time-sensitive updates, and are not always distinguished with those less urgent information. So it makes it difficult for staff to prioritize what steps to take or to prioritize. In the next finding, GCS IEPs are written with high levels of quality, reflecting procedural and substantive components aligned with student needs. So this takes us back to that data collection activity that I mentioned with the IEPs. And these were some of the findings. Overall, we can say they were generally positive in terms of our findings related to IEPs. So just to highlight, like the quality of the PLAF statements, or the present level of academic and functional performance statements. And I should back up and say that in terms of the IQUIS, it does have a 4-point rating scale where we look at the procedural pieces, and then we look at the substantive pieces, so thinking about quality. And so in terms of that 4-point rating scale, first, the procedural piece is whether it was present or not. And then the substantive pieces, again, looking at the quality. So in general, most of them were found adequate. So not to say that's not poor quality. Again, on that 4-point scale, adequate was a 3, and the high quality was a rating of a 4. So we identify that as an area of improvement. Although some of these things were written or identified as adequate, there was room for improvement to get that to high quality. So, for example, 83% of the IEP goals were written with high quality, meaning they were specific, measurable, with observable behaviors. They were time-bound, ambitious, and attainable, but again, room for improvement if you want them to be closer to 100%. We also wanted to highlight the alignment between developing high-quality educational programming for students, so their IEPs, and the alignment between student outcomes. So noting that there is very promising outcomes for students with disabilities in GCS. So we just noted that GCS has nearly doubled its graduation rate for students with disabilities from 33% in 2012 to 69.9% in 2025, which should be celebrated. Finding 1.3, so approaches for monitoring IEP progress at the student level vary substantially across GCS. So I did identify that specifically there were tools for progress monitoring, but there's variance in how or what tools might be used for staff. And there is no mandated district-wide process for what tool or how to use those tools. Progress monitoring was discussed in over 82% of those IEP goals, but documentation often lacks clarity about data collection methods, how results are shared with families, and then accountability among staff. And then most IEP progress monitoring statements were rated adequate. Again, that's a 3 on the 4-point scale, reflecting broad statements, but insufficient detail about implementation and communication, so an area for growth. Finding 1.4, so multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS, lack alignment with special education. We noted this we understand that MTSS, might be housed or maybe more of a general ed process, but thinking about how those systems can essentially talk to each other or work together. So GCS does provide MTSS guidance and resources through annual training. There's also a small team that oversees district-wide MTSS implementation, but there are no consistent school-level teaming structures. MTSS and special education systems are not fully integrated, which does lead to inconsistent planning for instructional and behavior supports for students with disabilities, and also a missed opportunity for collaboration with general and special education. And then staff structures, collaboration time, and training for MTSS are limited, which results in concerns about potential over-identification of students in special education. Finding 1.4, GCS relies heavily on their special education specialists to oversee school-level implementation of IDEA requirements, which does limit shared ownership and capacity across school sites. So this was something that arose quite a bit, across our focus groups and our interviews is, how skilled those special ed specialists were. And saying like the over-reliance is because they have that breadth of knowledge and skill to support. But it does limit their ability to offer those robust supports to schools because they are supporting so many schools and they also have so many different job responsibilities in terms of what they do within the districts. So within the district, I apologize. So over-reliance on those specialists do restrict the shared ownership and capacity at the school level, with staff reporting that specialists, again, are stretched thin and unable to provide sufficient hands-on supports. So moving into area 2, so focusing on staffing. So the first finding here is GCS generally maintains compliance with state teaching load standards, but current staffing practices do not consistently reflect the complexity of student instructional behavioral needs. So we did look at the teaching caseloads and how they essentially comply or match up with those state regulations. And we did see that there was compliance there, but again, that doesn't always account for the intensity of the individual needs of students with disabilities. And then of course, within talking to district level staff, we do learn that they are very responsive to individual school needs in terms of staffing. But again, within that, the staff do report that the growing demands and the administrative burden creates significant workload challenges, especially for those special ed teachers and paraprofessionals. And then in addition to that, these workload challenges, they do contribute to burnout and turnover, which is underscoring the need for GCS to review and improve staffing practices to ensure manageable caseloads and effective supports for all students. The next finding related to staffing, GCS provides resources to special ed staff that support effective delivery of a continuum of services in compliance with IDEA, but the resources do not fully support educator capacity. So in relationship to that, again, GCS providing those resources that enable staff to deliver the continuum of services. They provide the personnel, so paraprofessionals and those specialists, structured professional learning opportunities, access to instructional materials, assistive technology, and establish the systems for instructional coaching and technical assistance. So access to these resources like administrative support, collaboration, and tailored professional development is going to be vital for educator success. However, if these or when these supports are inconsistent, particularly for teachers who are in self-contained settings, educators do face isolation, increased stress, and burnout. So now we're moving into area 3, so alignment between general and special education departments. So the first finding here, GCS lacks structure opportunities for collaboration between special education and general education teachers, which does result in less cohesive instructional supports for students with disabilities. So in relationship to that, when talking to school leaders or school administrators, they did talk about their attempts to align planning periods to create those opportunities for collaboration, but it still remains a challenge for them, especially at the elementary level. Teachers also reported that scheduling conflicts and demands on special education staff does hinder that regular collaboration, which does impact the fidelity and consistency of instructional supports for students with disabilities. The next finding, very positive. GCS demonstrates a strong commitment, which kind of goes back to my point when I talked about, the involvement in this review, their willingness to provide their perspectives within those interviews and focus groups. Again, just highlighting the strong commitment across the district. They do demonstrate a strong commitment to professional learning and growth, but in terms of an area of area for improvement, it does not provide a sufficiently differentiated professional learning, specifically for general ed teachers, paraprofessionals, and school administrators on meeting the needs of students with disabilities. So what we found is that staff report that the availability of a wide variety of professional learning opportunities and resources, including in-person seminars and specialist-led coaching, is a positive. Special ed specialists do provide that ongoing support and training to principals and teachers, so offering that on-the-job learning opportunities throughout the school year. However, staff do report a need for more comprehensive and consistent training on IDA foundational knowledge, so specific to disability categories, legal requirements, instructional and behavioral practices. As those current offerings do not adequately meet foundational needs across roles. And then lastly, there were reports of scheduling challenges and voluntary attendance policies, which do hinder participation and available training, especially for staff who may benefit most from targeted support. So thinking about specifically paraprofessionals. The next finding, GCS does not currently provide adequate targeted support specifically for new alternatively certified and international teachers serving in special education classrooms. So thinking about new teachers, especially those who might be in those alternative pathways. So the Greenville Alternative Teacher Education Program, or GATES. So findings there is that those teachers frequently lack foundational knowledge in special education and will require more support with tasks such as developing IEPs. And then there was also, we found that there's a critical need for targeted training, specialized mentoring and induction, and ongoing coaching for these educators, especially for them to be able to meet IDEA compliance requirements and effectively implementing special education processes. Moving to area 4, so the first finding here is that GCS fosters positive relationships between staff and families. So using some of that survey feedback from the internal review, that families value clear and consistent updates directly from staff. The survey feedback did highlight the importance of timely communication that fits family schedules and needs. Staff did report that they use multiple methods of communication that's going to be tailored to their family's preferences. And by doing so, it does increase the responsiveness and the engagement from those families. And that staff also recognize the need for more district guidance on appropriate communication methods and boundaries. So for example, our finding in especially our focus groups is that, if they are using multiple methods of communication, specifically they're using something like Google Voice to text families, sometimes it might be around the clock communication that they might be getting from families in which they're wanting an immediate response. For example, if it's 10 o'clock at night, families expecting a response from teachers. So just a little bit of guidance around appropriate communication methods and boundaries with those. The next finding related to communication, GCS does provide engagement opportunities for families with students for families of students with disabilities. However, there is a continued need for additional guidance and support targeted to families. So what we do know is that GCS does host family-focused professional learning events that covers different topics such as special education processes, evaluation, IEP roles, and these sessions are held at various times to accommodate family schedules. But while these opportunities exist, family feedback does indicate a continued need for more guidance and support to help families understand special education systems, policies, and procedures. In the next finding, IEPs document varying levels of input from families. So again, going back to some pieces from that IEP review, a large majority of the IEPs reviewed included parent and guardian input. 27% of those rated as high quality, 43% as adequate. And while 34% showed no procedural attention to family input, what we did notice about much of the input is that it was generic or limited in detail. And that was likely due to unfamiliarity with special education terminology, them feeling intimidated by the formal IEP setting, or rushed during the meeting process. Families also requested more thorough guidance, such as advance notice and draft IEPs prior to meetings, as well as targeted questions to elicit more specific feedback to assist with the IEP development. And implementing these strategies could foster more collaboration and meaningful partnership between families and school staff. The next finding here, GCS staff observed families to be satisfied with their child's special education services, which is a positive. Staff and service providers report that GCS families are generally satisfied with their child services, especially when they feel their concerns are acknowledged and their children's needs are being addressed. Families new to special education do appreciate the availability of resources and individualized support, and they often express gratitude for guidance and reassurance from school staff. Strong relationships fostered during meetings and ongoing collaboration will contribute to a supportive environment and to families feeling empowered and engaged in their child's educational journey. And the last finding here, families of students with disabilities need easily accessible resources written in plain language. So within this, thinking about how they might navigate the website, for example, if that might be their first resource. Families report that the district's special education website can be difficult to navigate, and then not understanding the language that might be used in documents. So using more plain language in those resources and guides, covering processes, protocols, the IEP process itself, and other available services offered by the district. So moving into recommendations, again, you'll see the alignment with these recommendations to the 4 key focus areas. So this first recommendation is to revisit the process for regularly reviewing, updating, and communicating district level special education guidance. This can be done by establishing an annual schedule to review and update special education guidance documents and web pages, involving key stakeholders such as special ed staff, teachers, and families, and disseminating updated guidance through multiple channels, the website, emails, newsletters, for example, and then hosting informational sessions and Q&A forums for families to increase transparency and engagement. The next recommendation is investing in MTSS as a unifying framework to support special education processes and service delivery. So this can be done by conducting a district-wide MTSS review using nationally recognized tools. So as a reference, the MTSS Center does have a tool that can be leveraged, developing school-level structures to ensure MTSS practices and protocols are consistently implemented based on GCS's MTSS implementation guide and resources, and then providing ongoing professional development and training around MTSS. The next recommendation is in alignment with staffing. So revising the staffing guidance and structures to reflect a balanced approach between caseload and workload for special education personnel. So to do this, applying analysis to consider both the number of students and the complexity of their needs. Collecting and documenting data on how special ed teachers allocate their time across direct instruction, consultation activities, and administrative duties. In addition to that, their collaboration with general ed staff, and then also accounting for non-instructional responsibilities such as progress monitoring, communication with parents, to provide a complete picture of the teacher's workload. The next recommendation is alignment with Area 3, so alignment between general and special education departments. So increase opportunities for collaboration amongst staff to enhance cohesion of instructional supports. So to do this, some steps you could take here would be scheduling protected collaboration time by adding monthly co-planning sessions with structured agendas, strengthening the peer-to-peer connections by increasing virtual opportunities for special education teachers to share ideas and join cross-school professional learning communities. Implementing peer observation programs, so inviting special and general education teachers to observe each other's classrooms, share feedback, and use insights for collaborative growth. Or to create a resource sharing platform using digital tools so staff can easily exchange, for example, lesson plans, strategies, and to maintain consistent instructional support across the district. The next recommendation here, adopt a targeted and differentiated approach to professional learning that addresses the needs of all staff serving students with disabilities. Distributing the professional learning calendars in advance and using multiple communication channels to increase the awareness and participation among staff, especially for principals, general ed teachers, and paraprofessionals. Making certain trainings for certain groups mandatories, so specifically looking at school leaders, paraprofessionals, special ed teachers, and general ed teachers, offering flexible learning formats such as in-person, virtual, asynchronous, and then expanding the school level special education's capacity by having the specialists continue using a trainer-trainer model to develop teacher leaders, and if possible, considering adding more specialist positions if the budget allows. The last recommendation here is in alignment with communication. So centralize and simplify communication strategies and materials for families of students with disabilities with a focus on the user experience. So adopting a unified digital platform to streamline special education communication for parents, developing guidance materials that uses clear, plain language and ensuring that they are easily accessible for families. Streamlining the website navigation to reduce clicks for families when they're accessing key resources, and then applying best digital design practices, such as use of concise bullet points and consistent branding on those documents. That concludes the presentation of the findings and recommendations, and I'm going to open it up for questions.
Dr. Davis, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Mosley.
If I might, excuse me, Mr. Carver, before you start, we'll ask Dr. Stevens to come up so that you may have questions that go directly to the ALR researchers, or there may be some that are more appropriately answered by some of our personnel, and she'll kind of steer that in the right direction. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Cochran. Dr. Davis, thank you so much for being here today. This is a lot to unpack between the two presentations, and so I'm going to try to keep my questions brief. It appears that some of what rose to the top in your findings aligned with what rose to the top in Terry's findings, and specifically around progress monitoring. That bullet about accommodations, about it, I believe there was something in your presentation, Terry, that said something about, I don't remember if it was parents or teachers or administrators wanting like a menu of accommodation, like so they could be consistent with wording or language. Okay, yeah, the apples to apples comparison. Okay, that's right, okay. Regardless, I am curious, so I don't want to go over the things that are similar, because I think a lot of the recommendations will flesh that out based on what Dr. Royster said we can expect. But I did have just a quick question. I'm glad Terry's presentation gave us the breakout of what your scope was versus what the district's scope was, because I'm not sure that I was real clear on that going into this. So something that caught my attention, 101 IEPs. We have 15,000 students being served. I'm not a statistician. Is that an adequate sample size? Why is that number used? Is that, I would just like a little bit more, because I have a feeling anybody that sees that would possibly have that same question.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna get that question.
Yeah, no, I would consider that to be a limitation because what is that? Probably less than 1% or around 1%. And so that was agreed upon between AIR and the GCS team. I don't know if you want to also comment on that, but that was the agreed upon number. I know that wasn't a specific focus in terms of our review of looking at the IEPs, so that was just the agreed upon number. But we did want it to be representative in terms of disability categories, schools, grade levels, and so it's representative in that way versus the number.
Okay, so I appreciate that. Maybe this question's better for Ms. Hogan. Why did we, where did that number come from? And like, why was that the agreed upon number?
Yes, ma'am. When we were going through this process, one of the things that we talked about was what are the areas we want them to look at and get better in, and what information do we need? I have great concerns about our IEPs. I can specifically talk about those. I know what training we do. We know some of the things that we need to do differently. It's complicated, right? And then the IEP programs and systems. Last year, 2 years ago, we focused on the switching to a new system that then wasn't going to be something that we could do, that the state couldn't support us. So we had to switch back. We knew some of those internal problems and areas and issues that we needed to focus on. And so we wanted them to really focus on things that we didn't have information on so that they could give us additional support. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. So to our parents that might be listening, both here and maybe on their laptops, how do we reassure them that attention is being given to that? Because I think when they see that sample size, I think that would be a concern, mainly because they may feel like, well, yes, a lot of these other I mean, I understand what you're saying. A lot of these other findings were important to gain, but I just want to make sure that that aspect isn't lost, and I just want our parents to feel reassured that that is, even though it might not be fleshed out as robustly in this report, that that is still very much on the list. So
Absolutely. We're always trying to balance compliance and instruction. But what we do know is sometimes writing a really good IP doesn't equate to being a really great teacher and really great outcomes. And so trying to balance those, I think that really the presentation just heard mentioned about GATE teachers and international teachers and the support they need. So we have to really differentiate the instruction that we provide across the board. It's absolutely important, and that key piece would be on the compliance piece, right? So we are definitely focusing on that. I think it was just more of a very standard for us about we know what we need to do. It's just, we needed help on the other areas from them.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is it's still on the list, it's still a priority?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
It's still very, okay, got it.
I think maybe the shorter answer to that, or the shorter version of that, we know that's a reasonably significant area for improvement, and there really wasn't a need to expand the cost or time of their study for them simply to confirm what we already need. If that may be a shorter way to explain that.
Okay. That makes sense. My second question kind of goes along with that, and I have a feeling the answer might be similar. Whatever slide it was where you listed way back at the beginning, the focus groups that you spoke to, I noticed that that did not include what our internal evaluation did, which was parents, mainly parents, possibly students with special needs. Was that because we did the internal review, and is there no reason for an external audit to verify that what we've done internally is actually, because like a couple of things you did sort of verified some of the same themes that came out of our internal review. So I feel pretty good about, okay, we're all on the same page here. But I kind of feel like the external review hasn't verified, not that what we're producing internally isn't valid, but just that second reassurance that we're all on the same page. Does that make sense? So that's why I was wondering, what was that, just a scope decision about not, and it might be a Tracy question, it might be, I don't know who it is, but was that a scope decision?
Well, I think part of our decision too was exactly what you said, to reiterate that there were certain commonalities between the two studies, the two reviews. But also we had an opportunity to be able to leverage those focus groups and to be able to provide a huge access point to be able to have the size of the scope, the focus groups that we did, that AIR would not have been able to access. Okay. So we wanted to, in our internal audit, maintain our internal stakeholders, and then our external audit focus on the systems and structures that were externally reviewable.
I believe we provided all of the internal information we gathered to
the team.
Which I knew we were going to do. I guess in my brain was thinking there would be some type of external
I do believe
verification of that. I don't know what the other word to use.
There certainly was overlap for some of the stakeholders in the internal, which were also included in the in both reviews. We had administrators, district staff, some teachers who would have sat in both. So there were some stakeholder overlaps.
Okay. I just think parents were asked that question, perhaps, that they weren't included in the external piece. So I was just trying to understand the reasoning behind that. So I think I do. I
think we would have also struggled to find someone to respond to an RFP had we set out that we wanted this much input from this many people in this amount of time.
Yeah, I will say in addition to that, we knew that the internal review was happening simultaneously when we were about to conduct our data collection activities. Since the internal review yielded such high participation, especially from families, 15% is amazing. And coming in as an external reviewer, what we find and what we know in research is if we would have reached out to these families individually, we wouldn't have gotten a very high response rate, not as high as you all received with the internal review. And also because these activities were happening simultaneously, that would have been a difficult situation to navigate, again, not getting responses from families because they already participated in the internal review versus the external.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for clarifying that. And then my last question, it might be better for Dr. Royster. I'm going to guess that once this all fleshes out and you come to us, do we have a time frame for when, did you say there's a time frame for when you might come to us, Dr. Royster, with?
I think there are probably three. You may see some things in the budget recommendation.
Okay, that was the second part of my question.
All right. Then the other is going to depend on when we start putting this together, what looks like a logical time frame, particularly some of the things related to training. How much, what of that is most critical, and how much of that can we get done before school started?
Right.
So that will play into it. And then whenever you all conclude with the questions about this, I'll give you the first feedback that you're going to get about two things we're about to do.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. That is my questions for right now. Thanks, Jeff.
Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell.
Thank you for this presentation. And I have a couple of questions. I know you said that we probably need more specialists in the SPED area. I want to know, how many specialists do we presently have, and what is the average of how many schools they have? What is their caseload like in the district?
They have 4 to 5 schools each, and we have 12 at the elementary and 11 at the secondary.
I know when I was in the school system, the SPED departments used to have assistants that helped the teachers with the administrative stuff, with the paperwork and stuff. And that allowed the teachers to concentrate on the students, which is what we need to concentrate on. Are the teachers still responsible for that, for doing the paperwork themselves, or do they have help?
I believe what you're describing was before I arrived, and this is my 10th year. So yes, ma'am, there was a position that did paperwork or assisted with paperwork over 10 years ago. So no, they do not have any support for that right now. Teachers are responsible for doing the paperwork, the meetings, and teaching.
And that probably contributes to the burnout and turnover.
Yes, ma'am, it's very challenging.
At that point in time, special education services was not exclusively, but predominantly focused on compliance, i.e. the IEP was written correctly. That was really what they were focused on. We eliminated those clerical positions. I don't remember now how many there were, because that was a number of years ago, and
I
converted.
think they were at every school.
We converted those positions to increasing the number of special ed specialists to provide support, not just with compliance, but support with instruction and the carrying out of IEPs. So we diverted resources from the clerical task to providing more professional support. And that was probably done maybe 14, 15 years ago, something like that.
Well, I know that the teachers are always saying, you know, if they could just teach and not have to do all of this other stuff, that would be great if we could look into that as to how much time they spend on administrative stuff and not on the students.
I think as you look at that, as we look at that and we consider that, we also have to be reminded that that IEP is not simply a compliance with IDEA and to ensure that we don't get into legal difficulty. It is the guiding document for that student's instruction
right.
in both regular ed classroom and special needs classroom. That is essential that the teacher be intimately familiar with and having written that document themselves. The part that those clerical people would have done years ago now is far more easily facilitated using technology.
If I could also, we would want to remind everyone of the importance of the classroom assistants in our special education classrooms in terms of instructional support for students as well as progress monitoring. So our classroom assistants.
What is the number on the assistants, the parapros that you have in the special ed classrooms? What is the number?
The total number of assistants that we have, or the ratio?
If you have assistants for the teachers, do you have a parapro that has 4 special ed teachers that they go to? Or what is the ratio?
Yeah, there's not a standard, so our specialized classes, our self-contained classes are going to have at least one paraprofessional in them. And then
Is that a full-time? I mean, they stay?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. They'd be there full-time
Okay.
with their teacher.
Okay.
And then many of our classes have 2 and 3.
So that was the self-contained?
Yes, all of what I
As
just
for-
described was for self-contained.
So the paraprofessionals, they go bounce back and forth to a couple of teachers
Not
if it's not a
typically.
self-contained classroom?
The majority of our special ed paraprofessionals are in a classroom with a teacher, and we would have 1 to 3 typically in a classroom. And that would depend on the type of classroom, and then the disabilities in the classroom, the students in the classroom, the number, the severity, and those types of things.
What is the student ratio, teacher-student ratio for our SPED classes?
For each of those, it would vary. There are certain classes and specialized classes where the state limit will be 12. There are others where it'd be 15, and there are others where it'd be 18. So you can have 18 students with disabilities in certain classes by level. That gets higher
Okay, I was
as you.
told something different, like they can have up to 25, and I say of special ed students, no.
I'm just telling you what the state limit is.
Okay, can you give me, can I get that information?
We can certainly give
because-
you by level, and then
Yeah.
by schools, yes, ma'am, but it varies greatly. But there's going to be at least one paraprofessional in each one of those classrooms.
Okay, I know with the GATE program, a lot of the people that come in the GATE program come in to be special ed certified, get special ed certified. What kind of PD and support is provided to those in GATE so that we can retain those alternative people, the people that's coming from the business?
Yes. So each of our alternative certification pathways has a different training model depending on the need. But all of our alternative certified teachers have summer opportunities, summer professional learning opportunities, as well as ongoing monthly support. They have additional mentor teachers. They have a peer teacher within the school that supports them. And then we also have coaches that support them in the school setting that they join them to co-teach, to model, to provide feedback in addition to our administrative staff that supports them.
Okay, that sounds good, but is it being done? Never mind about that. SPED, let's see. That's all I have right now, but thank you for the presentation. It tells what we are seeing and what we need to do to rectify some of these situations. Thank you. That's
Dr.
all.
Stiles.
Ms. Hogan, I had a question. Do we basically use the state guidance for our workloads for our teachers and our paraprofessionals? That continues to be something I hear from my constituents. The same finding that their caseloads are much too large, that it's contributing to burnout. That's an area that I personally am concerned about. And I know, in my opinion, and this is personally, sometimes when I look at state guidance, I see that as a minimum expectation. And also, those numbers are also often not updated. Maybe that guidance goes all the way back, 10, 15 years. So my question is, I would like to understand what are the state guidelines in comparison to best practices, because that's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in state guidelines. I'm interested in best practices. And I also want to throw this out, Ms. Hogan, that we have an advocacy committee. If the state needs to relook at that guidance for numbers, then we can advocate for that. Because I know that our funding is based on those allocations, that state guidance. It may be time that we need to use our advocacy chair, Mr. Sailors, and Dr. Royster is our superintendent, and a committee to move forward with making some recommendations to the state to get that changed. So can you answer that question? Are we following state guidance? How old is that? And how does that compare to best practices today?
I've been doing this over 25 years, and I can't tell you when it started, but it's definitely over 25 years. My entire time in my career, those numbers have been that way. We absolutely agree that they need to be lower, and we absolutely do cap many of our classes and try really hard to start lower, okay? And when you say, is that what we use? That is the absolute first starting point, right? We know, to your point, that's the minimum. But there are many, many things that we look at. When Mr. Sailors mentioned earlier about when we moved classrooms back home or students back home and classrooms within their community, we look at students in an area, what their geographic, their bus ride's gonna be, right? We have a lot of things. We take rosters in every week from our schools, so if students move in, we know what the numbers are. We look at those. We had a room at MT where we have these huge boards where we have the teacher, the number of assistants, the number of students, and we're constantly monitoring those numbers. But I think we all know the numbers don't don't tell the full story, right? There may be a class that has 12 students or 6 students in it that needs a lot more support. And so we are constantly looking at it. The sped specialists, the school psychologists, the related service providers that work with them are really charged with bringing back that information to the 2 directors, an elementary and secondary director, and then we have regular meetings to look at those. What we typically do throughout the school year is, as the numbers would increase, we would often add paraprofessionals, because adding teachers, there just aren't teachers there. I've spoken to you all before that post-COVID, we started having a shortage of paraprofessionals that we did not have pre-COVID. That was an easier solution, if you will, or an easier assist to pre-COVID. But that is how we address it throughout the school year. We absolutely look at more than just the number. What is challenging is it may look on paper, and there are teachers that will know, for instance, that Miss Jones at one school only has 8 or 10 kids. We just had a scenario this week. We had a student just identified and needed to go to a new school. So there were 2 schools that were closest that student needed transportation. This one had large numbers and this one had small numbers, but it was going to be a 2-hour bus ride here. So we had to put the student here. And the teachers don't often know all that is looked at, because we do have to look at those pieces as well. Does that make sense?
Yes. So it has actually been 25 years or more since the state has addressed those guidelines for staffing for teachers and paraprofessionals. That's very concerning to me. Would it be helpful if we went, planned an advocacy committee meeting to maybe advocate for revisiting that?
I think one of the concerns that we continue to have is finding high-quality candidates to fill vacancies that we have. And to go back to Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell's question about our alternatively certified programs, we are utilizing staff through those programs to fill vacancies that are in our special education classrooms that we have not been able to identify candidates through traditional routes. Because of that, we have done some additional collaboration with the special education department and the coaches to support the GATE and the alternative certified teachers as they are making that transition. But as noted in both reviews and through discussion, that continues to be an area that we will continue to focus on.
Thank you. I know from serving on the last governor's task force that one of our recommendations was that perhaps we look at pay for our special education educators, and that we elevate the pay for special education teachers so that we can draw more teachers in. I'm not sure if that's made any progress with our state leaders, but that certainly also points to a state issue that needs to be addressed. Actions need to be taken in that area. I will talk to Mr. Sailors about the possibility of maybe addressing both of those concerns through advocacy. Thank you.
I think one of the most significant things would be what you just mentioned, Dr. Stiles, and to parallel what Dr. Stevens said. Right now, for us to go out and hire more teachers, we're going to end up selecting from lesser qualified, lesser quality people. And that does not, as everybody up here knows, that doesn't help us. The most important thing to have is a high-quality teacher in the classroom. So the ratio was less important to the part you just said, if there is a way to increase compensation, but to have the funds provided with which to do that. When Congress passed IDEA, 1974, the original 94-142, the commitment was to pay, I believe, 40%. The most the Fed has ever paid, I believe, was just under 20%, and it now sits at less than 18%. So the students that we serve have a significant financial impact to the providing of those services for which we are not receiving a commensurate amount of money. We talked about class sizes. We have some classes far smaller than the ones that Ms. Hogan referenced, far smaller, with the students that we serve at Washington Center and in a few other locations in the district. But we're committed to provide the service that those students need to have. What we wish is that there was the same level of commitment from those who passed the requirements to do so, to provide the level of funding that would be necessary to attract more teachers into serving students with special needs.
We're also very fortunate, just like in a turnover of regular ed teachers, our teacher turnover as a whole is like a point below the state of South Carolina. Turnover for special ed teachers throughout the country is 12 to 15%. We're at the bottom of that turnover rate. We're at 12.2. But that's obviously higher than our turnover rate for all teachers, which is almost 3 points below that. So that, when any recommendation in here regarding more personnel, it then becomes a real struggle to say, well, is more personnel the key? If that, and I would argue it's not, if that brings in lesser qualified people that we cannot reasonably bring up to a qualified level. Ideally, we would hire no one. We would hire no international teacher. We would hire no alternatively certified teacher to provide any services to any student. But we are not right now in a position to do that, nor based on our conversations, not just within South Carolina, but throughout the country. There are few, if any, places that are in a position to do that.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Royster. That is so true, and those are excellent points. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Cochran.
Thank you, Dr. Bell.
I think we are right at the end of our time limit, so without objection, I would like to extend for 10 minutes, please. Ms. Leventis Wells.
Thank you, Chairman Cochran. I would just like to say, I think both of these presentations, Dr. Davis and Terry and Susan, I think both of these presentations really bring everything to the forefront, and it gives us a better picture of what we really need to do, how we need to help parents and be their hearing and their voice, and also hearing the teachers and all those involved in meeting the needs of these children with disabilities. Some more severe disabilities than others. And in those classrooms, that's what is so time consuming when you look at Washington Center and you go to their graduations and you go to their classrooms. Those classrooms need instruction, teachers, paraprofessionals, I mean the whole bit. They have severe disabilities. Our classrooms in some of our schools, like you've all seen and what you've said, Tracy, everything. We just need to figure out the best way to utilize our resources to minimize the burnout with everyone in that classroom, and to meet the needs of our students, which is a lot of work, a lot of responsibility. But your information was greatly appreciated, yours as well, and now the work begins. So thank you for everything. Dr. Royster, thank you for this presentation. And I totally agree with Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell on what she stated with those classrooms, because I hear the assistants in those classrooms trying to lift those students or help those students, and, you know, a full day of that is very stressful on the body and on the mind, and then you go home, and then you got to be back the next day. So thank you for the presentation, and I look forward to great things to happen for our future. Thank you.
Are there any remaining questions? All right. Thank you all so much.
Doctor, if I might, before we leave the topic, I think I mentioned in response to Ms. Mosley's question earlier. So 2 things that we're immediately working on. You may recall several places in there related to communication. More specifically, particularly in the forums, in the summit, parents evidenced a desire to have, they expressed it, I think, as backpack for their use that would include things that aren't
currently in backpack. And I understand that expression, but unfortunately, backpack won't do those things. It's something we wrote, and there are limitations around it. So we're putting together a RFP to find a replacement that will combine those things in backpack, in PowerSchool, and pull in the items that parents were discussing and had recommendation about making it more readily available to them in one platform. So we're about to put out an RFP to do that. We already have one that we were working on to, in essence, replace backpack. We're expanding that. Now, obviously, that'll have a price tag on it, but we'll come back to you all, probably ask to use some fund balance to get that underway and roll it out for a multi-year rollout. It might be we can get that done before school starts. We'll have it selected before school starts, but to be able to get all the data in there to make that more convenient and make that information more accessible. So you go in there and look for, if you got multiple students in your family, you look for one student's information, you can see the siblings' information in the same place. The other thing is we believe it's important that parents have somebody to help them kind of navigate some of these processes and send them in the right direction. Because when you think about, we alluded to this earlier, we got 6,000 teachers that are providing services, instructional services to students with disabilities. We've got numerous people providing services in transportation. We've got people in medical services that report to Janet Loggy that are providing medical services to these students. We're providing instruction at 90 plus locations. And the whole world of this is complicated. You all already know that, and people that deal with it on a daily basis, it's complex. So we're going to post for a parent resource representative to help parents as a guide through this. So if they have a question, if they have why is it taking so long to do this? They put them with the right person and follow up to make sure that that question was addressed. Similar to the function our ombudsman provide for the district as a whole, an individual geared toward providing that level of service, but across really a broader spectrum within the world of special ed services for our parents. And we will post that job within the next week so that we have someone in place shortly to be able to carry out those functions. So those are two immediate things that you should see. And the other one, which is less impactful long term, is to bring these summit participants back and sort of share with them some of the pathway going forward. We'll do that at some point as well. Thank you.
These presentations today were at this stage for information only, and so with the conclusion of that agenda item, we will move down to the last item on the administration portion of today's agenda, which is item 3.02, revision of board policy IA, artificial intelligence and student device use. We do have a motion. Well, first of all, Dr. Oyster, would you like to speak to this issue?
I would defer anything to since this was an ad hoc committee of the board, would defer that to the chair of the ad hoc committee.
Ms. Mosley.
Thank you so much. I'm actually going to turn over most of it to Doug, I believe, but just for the public to understand, the ad hoc committee was formed a few months ago. Dr. Stiles put me as the chair. It consisted of Ms. LaVentus Wells, Mr. Klein, Ms. Goodwin Cowell, and Ms. Morrison Fair. And we met with Mr. Webb, to talk about how do we bring an AI policy to our district, because at this point we haven't had anything. And Mr. Webb provided us with a little background that when he went in search of AI policies, both within our state as well as outside of our state, there just aren't a lot, because AI obviously is a little bit of a new beast, and everybody's trying to play catch up a little bit and trying to figure out what makes the most sense. We had a presentation in here, I believe, or at least it was to our board, I can't remember, about, I think it's real clear to make, we need to make the point clear that this policy is specific to the AI tool that our district has chosen to use, which is Magic School. It has nothing to do with all the AI tools out there like ChatGPT, anything like that. That is not the scope of this particular policy. This policy also does not address the academic integrity aspect, because we have other policies that address academic integrity. So our committee was charged with specifically very narrow focus on a policy of how we're going to implement, use, leverage the Magic School tool, the guidance that we're going to provide to our teachers, our instructional teams. And so what you see in your documents, on your board documents, is it became very clear that since this is an instructional tool, because keep in mind, we're not using AI as a primary teaching aid, it is literally a supplemental aid, that we already have instructional policies on the books. And so in looking at our instructional policies, it was recommended from Mr. Webb to update and include and enhance policy IA that is already on the books. And so what you see online, the language that we are removing from that policy is the crossed out language. Language that we're leaving is just simply the typed text. And then anything that's underlined is the enhancement or the addition to the policy that we made specific to this topic. And so I just wanted to be very clear to the board that our committee, that was the scope of this. It's not anything beyond that. One point to make, and then I will turn this over to Mr. Webb to add anything additional, is at the very end of the policy, there's a section that says the superintendent will develop additional parameters in an accompanying administrative rule. It became very clear during our committee conversations that sometimes we tended to get into the weeds of how this was going to work. And a reminder that as a board, as a policy board, our policies are more general. They're more, they're not intended necessarily to spell out the details of how we implement something. It's more of a general guidance. So again, talking about scope, that's what this policy was. Once we as a board agree and vote to implement this policy, my understanding from Mr. Webb is that then the district will take the policy, run with it, and create that administrative rule. The best example I can remind y'all is the dress code. We always had a dress code policy. It was a year or two ago where the district came to us and said, we're going to flesh that out a little bit more in an administrative rule and give you more specifics. So for the public and for all of our benefit, I just wanted to make sure that's the context in which we're functioning today. So, Mr. Webb, I will turn it over to you to add what you need to add.
Sure, thank you. You did a great job. I don't have too much more to add.
Good.
But like you referenced, like many things, GCS, with the adoption of this policy, will be on the forefront of having a policy, whereas many school districts do not. And I believe the committee work was extensive, thorough, some great discussions through the committee that yielded the results that are before you as far as the draft policy. The policy hits the salient points on AI. It talks about educational use, privacy and security, ethical use, accessibility. We want to make sure that all students are able to access it. Touches on professional development and training and making sure it's transparent for parents and guardians. And it tasks the administration, as Ms. Mosley said, with coming up with details through administrative rule that are consistent among all schools. We don't want one school using it in a different way, drastically different than another school, for example. So the policy before you, I think, is a strong policy that recognizes AI's evolving, right? AI could change and it will change over the next several years. And while it touches on the salient points, it also gives flexibility for the administration to navigate those changes through administrative rule, through practices, with this policy being sort of the guiding structure for it all. So happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Mr. Webb. We do have a motion coming from the ad hoc committee of the board that was formed to look at this issue. And so do we have a maker of the motion this morning?
I can make a motion. Recommended motion from the ad hoc committee for AI and electronic device use policy to approve the revisions to the board policy IA as presented.
Okay, so we have the motion and we have a second. Ms. Brett, I think you indicated that you had a question, so we'll start the questions and discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. So looking at this, it seems like it's a very open-ended policy. We don't seem to have, the restrictions are there, but you're saying the scope is for Magnet School specifically. That's not really written in this policy. Will that be in the administrative rule? Do we need to be more specific here, or what do you think?
My recommendation would not be specific as to a specific platform, company use. That could change over the years. 3 years from now, the school district could be using something else that we might find that is necessary. I think anything with regard to specific platforms, if we want to go that route, would be in an administrative rule. But even that, I would be hesitant to put a specific one far as the name itself. So I think what this does is it really touches on the important aspects of AI. And I failed to mention, I should mention, there's another section towards the end dealing with the use of district technology as a whole and screen time. Making sure that there's an emphasis in policy that screen time needs to be used and technology is used for truly academic purposes and furtherance of the curriculum. Nothing that's excessive or busy time just to use screens, district technology that's used in the classroom. So that limitation and that emphasis is also included at the end of this policy.
So it says that the superintendent will develop additional parameters in an accompanying administrative rule. I guess my question is there a way for us to actually, set a limit as far as, one, screen time is concerned, and two, the use of AI capabilities is concerned? Is that a far stretch to think about that? Or, right now, like I said, it's so open-ended, and I know the administrative rule will come after the policy is implemented, but maybe Dr. Royster, you could kind of expand, or Doug?
Yeah, I think we'll tag team it with academics and Dr. Royster as well. But, my view is that we will work collaboratively on an administrative rule with additional detail both on AI as well as screen time and use of technology. And that will be shared with the board. Certainly open to comments or thoughts on that as well during that process. But that will include additional detail. Now, whether we put minutes in that administrative rule, that might not be the best avenue for it. It might just be through training and other communication to schools, and far as additional parameters. But the administrative rule will have a significant amount more detail than the policy. As Ms. Mosley mentioned, a good, strong policy, especially on AI, especially on technology, something that really changes with time pretty quickly, potentially, is that you have a strong, good, broad policy that gives everyone direction, right? And I think this does that.
Okay, I think that answers my question, and I do understand it better, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Cochran.
Any further questions or discussion? Ms. Middleton?
Thank you. The AI, is that only for middle and high school? And maybe that's in here and I can't see it.
That as is currently applied in practice is only in middle school and high school for our classes and our schools, correct?
And that will be in the administrative policy at a later date? That's not in here?
That is not in the policy. That will most likely be in the administrative rule. That's correct.
I feel that, well, especially in the elementary schools, but maybe going into the middle schools also, kids really learn so well by, trying to please their teachers and please their other peers. I mean, that's just how children learn and develop and prosper and become successful. And I feel that the AI format with a screen and all that can kind of detract from some of that. So I guess I want to make sure that parents have input here, and maybe that's in there, and maybe that'll be later, and that it's not going to be used for any kind of formal testing or anything of that nature. I do sometimes become concerned that it's a crutch, if you will, where, sort of like, it's a long day, let's throw some AI stuff in there and let's just let the kids work on that for a while, which I don't think is as productive.
That's right.
But I also know that we have to go forward.
The worst old school teaching tool was a worksheet. And we do not need technology to become the modern day version of the worksheet. That's a tremendous waste of instructional time and does not improve, most importantly, does not improve student knowledge, and it certainly doesn't improve instruction. There are a lot of other aspects you have to consider about this. When people talk about screen time, you have to also have the realization that all of our textbooks are digital now. So there's some amount of screen time if you're just using the textbook. Some of the assessments done by the state actually have an AI component to them, and we have no choice but to use that component. But our instructional use of AI, certainly at this point, needs to be restricted to the secondary school level and or teacher utilization of AI. In other words, helping them plan their lessons, draw resources, that sort of thing. But technology can be a great tool, but it can also greatly hinder what we need our students to receive from us if we don't apply it correctly and use it in line with what we know are the best instructional practices. And the best instructional practices have nothing to do with technology or in person. It has to do with how you present knowledge and how you engage and interact with the students that you have with you, whether you're using a tool or it's simply you working with that student.
Totally agree.
I also think, if I may, to piggyback on that, what's going to be important in the administrative rule, talking about input and feedback, will be school level feedback, teachers, educators, looking at the administrative rule. And there are all kinds of components with AI, as far as ethical use, plagiarism, all kinds of things that we want that input on as well. So I know academics is going to work on that, and we will all work to get that input.
Thank you for that. I have two additional questions. Does the state require give any guidance for how we use AI? Or is it just open?
Go ahead.
State is actually currently working on their own policy and guidance around the use of AI, and so there are standards that are aligned specifically with AI use for some of the college and career readiness standards, and those are currently 2 of the classes that we are piloting in our high schools currently right now, aligned with those standards.
And what is our commitment to Magic School? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? Can we change at any moment? Can we say, hey, we don't like Magic School, we don't like what they're putting in there, we don't like?
Correct. So we have an annual contract that we review, and we continuously ensure that they are meeting the memorandum agreements, the security and safety things, parameters that we put in place. But that is an annual contract that we review.
Is it expensive?
Accurate, yes.
Should there be some huge issue with it?
Okay, that's good to hear. Is it expensive?
I can get that exact number for you, what our district expense for our current platform is, but we also could break that out for the student access as well as the teacher access, because we have paid for all staff to have access to the teacher components of it as well.
That's all I have. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any further questions or discussion? Dr. Presley.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. Just briefly, I wanted to echo what Superintendent Royster just said about the need for continued support. Y'all, what this boils down to is essentially the age-old conundrum of policy versus practice. And what we're tasked with as a board is to inform that policy that is indeed broad stroke enough to umbrella a particular vendor or what have you. So we know that. Where the rubber's going to meet the road is with practice. And so where we hear it as board members is when parents call us and say, Ann, my student is spending too much time there in the first grade and I'm concerned about their Chromebook use, right? Well, there's usually an explanation behind that. There's some testing things that have to occur with those. There's some things where the Chromebooks have to happen. With the actual implementation of this policy, once we're beyond that, we're looking at 2 things, and it's basically the appropriate presence of these in the educational landscape, okay? Not just by grade level, not just by subject area, although that actually does have a lot to do with it, but by task, y'all. And when we start talking about how we assess and how we instruct, that level of intentionality has to take place task by task, teacher by teacher, 9 weeks by 9 weeks, lesson by lesson. So I look forward to hearing ways that the district will continue to support what that decision-making process looks like to best meet the needs of our students. And I think we can hit that happy medium. This is just the beginning point with the policy level, but when we get into the administrative rules and those things, we'll be able to add more meat on the bones. Thank you so much.
Does anyone have anything further? All right, at this point, we will move to the vote on the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries, and this is the end of the administrative section this morning. So Dr. Stiles, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cochran, for chairing that section. Our 4th matter of business is instruction, and Dr. Presley will serve as the chair of instruction today. And Dr. Presley, I'm going to give you the floor at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 4.01 on the instruction, section asks for, of course, I've lost it. Sorry about this. I'm sorry. Innovative and honors course approvals. There is a recommended motion from the administration to approve the local board courses as presented. Do I have a maker of the motion?
A motion to approve the local board courses as presented.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Doolin. Do I second? I'm sorry, is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Presley. Our fifth item of business is Building and Grounds, and Mrs. Brett will serve as the Chair of Building and Grounds today. And Ms. Brett, you have the floor at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So 5.01 is our facilities project update. Dr. Royster, do you have anything you'd like to say about this update?
I don't have any particular item of note to bring to your attention. Be glad to answer any question you might have, or Colonel Carlin will answer.
Yes, sir, Mr. Sailors.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Gentlemen, whoever. The fire that was at MT Anderson, it was contained within the one space, and as my understanding was started by a battery pack. Am I correct?
That's the initial findings of the investigation from the fire. It was started by a battery pack, yes, sir.
Do we have that same problem percolating somewhere else?
We have changed the storage of the batteries at MT Anderson. We have no other large grouping of batteries such as at other places in the district, but it has caused us to review where we do have those anywhere. And there is, the insurance investigation is still ongoing as to what they believe might have been the cause of perhaps those battery packs shorting out, for lack of a better term. But there were a large number of them stored in one place. Now, the place it was stored, block wall all the way around.
Yeah.
So as secure a place as it could be, the issue with the cleanup there has been the debris resulting from the melting of the battery packs and the damage that was caused by, well, the unavoidable damage by extinguishing the fire. So the cleanup there will take a while. But to go beyond that at this point, we could give you some additional update, but that would need to be an executive session regarding the preliminary discussions that we have had with the insurance company. We're on the verge of reoccupying the first floor there. It's clean. We do air testing on both levels. It's completely clean. There are two separate air handler systems. So the air handling for the second floor is completely separate from the first floor. We likely will reoccupy that within the next week, George, week to 10 days. Second floor, gonna be a while longer. Mm-hmm. Part of which has to do with cleaning the contents of that floor, and particularly, this is just a minor point, but it creates a major issue. There are cubicles throughout the upstairs. Some of you have been up there. They're fabric covered. That debris has permeated the fabric, and it's, I think now the insurance company's belief that to clean that exceeds the cost of them replacing those. And if we replace them, that will take us months to do, just simply because of how long it takes to get those cubicle dividers. So we don't have a good, firm timeline for reoccupancy of the second floor, at least not at 100% of its capacity.
Most of the second floor was the renovation from a new conference space.
There was a large conference space up there. It also houses all the special ed services. It also houses food and nutrition services. Now, we're underway with their new building, which should be ready for occupancy this fall. So it may be likely they go straight into that new building. It also houses all of student services. So Dr. Skipper, the individuals that report to him, medical services, interventionist, those folks, attendance, social work, and the internal auditor. There are a few other kind of miscellaneous individuals up there. Those are the primary departmental occupancies on the second floor. There's also a big records area downstairs. There was no damage to it. And the cleanup downstairs was far less time-consuming than cleanup upstairs. But our contractors did an outstanding job. They put a high level of resources in there and did a very thorough job. We've done air testing throughout the process and would do final air testing before we reoccupy any area of the building. And I think we've already got a clean air test for
Yes, sir.
all of the downstairs. And have they already met with all the employees from downstairs, or that's about to happen?
That's this afternoon.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And we'll do the same when we go to reoccupy the upstairs.
Okay.
So they can ask the third-party environmental contractor any questions they have about the indoor air quality issues or the chemicals, anything like that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Colonel Carlin, football field transformations.
Yes.
Looking at both Wade Hampton and Greenville High School, they look really good.
Getting close.
Yeah, so
Excuse me, fellas. Can I please add, without any objection, another 10 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. When will they be usable? I know that Greenville, they were still stitching it together. I'm not sure about Wade Hampton.
They'll be usable by the end of the month.
Okay, and then the 5 that are coming up next for the summer, they're currently being bid,
They're in the bidding process.
and they'll start when?
Soccer and lacrosse play a factor in that, but besides that, we should be ready to rock.
In the spring?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors. Ms. Goodwin Caldwell.
Colonel Carlin, along the line of M.T. Anderson, the departments that were up there, where were they relocated to?
They have been relocated at multiple locations. People that are able to work from home or working from home. A number of the itinerant personnel are working in one of the schools that they serve. We have some at Overbrook. We have some
Reedy Laurel
on the
upstairs.
second floor of Reedy Laurel, which you may recall, that's the upper grades floor. So there are no students up there, not occupied yet.
I think Greenview, CDC, and
Greenview, CDC,
Washington Center.
Space Drive, there's some out there.
Dr. Skipper's house is Space Drive. Yes, sir.
So,
Are any of those departments being, not coming back? I've heard that instructional technology is not no longer gonna be a department. Is that correct?
that has nothing to do with M.T. Anderson.
They're
we
not
are-
upstairs?
We are restructuring instructional technology because as we have more infused that throughout all of our academics staff and our instructional coaches throughout the district, we have less of a need for a full department of instruction.
Were they not upstairs in MT?
Some of them were downstairs here, and some of them were over at M.T. Anderson.
Oh, I thought they were upstairs, MT Anderson. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin Caldwell. All right, if there are no more questions, that will cover our facilities project update and leads us to 5.02, which is the sanitary sewer easement here at the central office. And we do have a recommended motion from the administration. Would anyone like to make the motion?
I'll motion to approve the sanitary sewer easement at the central office as requested by the city of Greenville.
All right, we have a maker and a second. Dr. Royster, is there anything you'd like to say about this?
It's just directly related to the construction of the addition to the district office. And we discovered during that process, there was never an easement that we can locate unless you all have found one.
We have not.
This site, before the building was constructed on it in like 71, 72, was the site of an elementary school. And likely, in fact, I'm sure, that elementary school predates the 1952 consolidation. So it was a school within the city of Greenville Public Schools. Can't ever find the original easement. Now, obviously, we've had a sanitary sewer line all that time. But, so that's necessary for us to go back, for them to do the work they need to do to upgrade that and to facilitate the addition.
Thank you for that. All in favor of this motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And that concludes 5.02. I'll hand it back over to you, Dr. Stiles.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Brett. This concludes our committee of the whole agenda for today. But before I take a motion to conclude, I just wanted to remind all board members to remain in their seats as our audience leaves, because we will take a motion to go into executive session to review the results of our board self-assessment. So I need a motion to adjourn at this time.
Motion to adjourn.
Mrs. Doolan has made a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Linda Leventis Wells has seconded the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion carries. Thank you so much for coming, everyone.